From KPFK in Los Angeles, California, Valley Free Radio in Florence, Massachusetts, WNUC in Detroit, and BikeTalk.org worldwide, this is Bike Talk.
Bike Talk.
Welcome to Bike Talk. I'm Taylor Nichols.
And I'm Nick Richard.
Hey, Nick.
How's it going?
It's going well. I am in Sparta, Wisconsin, which is the cycling capital of America. So they say.
Huh.
The last couple of days have been hard. I did 98 miles yesterday, and I did 96 miles today, and it was hot and humid. And I think the reason that Sparta is the cycling capital of America is because today I rode on a trail almost the whole way. And it's really great to be away from cars. And, you know, part of it was a dirt road and a gravel road in the woods. And it was just a really pleasant ride. And I passed a lot of other people who were biking locally, you know, that were just going out for a ride. But when you're doing a long ride, 100 miles, riding on gravel is kind of a pain in the ass also.
Wow.
Some of it is gravel and some of it is hard-packed dirt. But it was really nice to ride on, I got to tell you, after having been on, you know, roads with cars kind of speeding by. It was really nice to be in the woods and just riding through the woods. But my miles per hour was about 10 miles an hour. And you just can't really push it that long when you're riding on those kinds of surfaces. I continue to run into people, which is really one of the fun things about the trip. And I ran into Brian and Mary Georgia, and they were going east to west, and they're doing the Laura Ingalls Wilder track. And they stopped in Pepin. And last night I slept in Pepin, Wisconsin, which is the birthplace of Laura Ingalls Wilder. And last night when I got to town, I went and jumped in Lake Pepin, which was really great. It's a great big lake. And it was so nice to get into town right at sunset. And I just stripped down naked and jumped in the lake.
Nice. And you have an interview?
Brian and Mary Georgia, yeah.
Were you naked?
No.
So I was struggling up a little hill just about 40 miles outside Minneapolis, and I run into Brian and Mary Georgia, who are going from basically like the Outer Banks, you said, the coast of North Carolina, to the West Coast, right?
That's right.
So, hey, Brian, you're a transportation planner, you said.
I studied transportation planning.
Yeah. Where?
At the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
Yeah, all right. And how are the roads? Do you approve?
Some states have much better facilities than others. You know, Kentucky and their use of rumble strips across the entire shoulder is frustrating.
Doesn't that kill you? That's in Montana, too.
Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah, brutal.
Yeah.
But yeah, there have been a lot of states, and obviously cities have a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
So you can go to some cities and tell that they have bikes at a forefront of their planning mindset.
Yeah, Minneapolis is like that. And you can tell that we're right on the edge of a road because there's a lot of traffic going by us. Mary Georgia, what day are you guys on?
Day 33. We just hit 4 weeks a couple days ago. So.
Wow, so that's moving right along. How many miles a day you think?
I would say at this point we're averaging like 70 miles a day. We've had a few bigger days in the 80s and 90s. We did 1 century one day, and a couple days that came pretty close, like 97, 98 miles.
Yeah, I would count that as a century, personally.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
And how's the wind been?
So far, not too bad. I hear that we haven't hit the worst of it in the high plains yet, so far not too bad.
Yeah, I do think the prevailing winds are west to east, but as I've learned, that's not always the case.
It's not, and the only day that we had a wind from the east, we happened to be traveling due east. So, but
fate,
right? But the heat dome that I hear has kind of given us a southern wind quite a bit. So we've actually had a surprising tailwind numerous days.
And has the heat been bad? Because this is my first hot day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was through North Dakota and Montana, and it was cool. A couple of nights I was cold. So
I believe that. You're asking the wrong people here because I grew up in Florida. Mary Georgia grew up in Georgia. So
right.
Us Southerners.
So this is normal.
This is a cool summer day right now.
Yeah. And what's your end point?
Do we have it figured out quite yet?
Probably like Ecola State Park, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And where's that?
The coast of Oregon, near the Columbia River.
Oh, okay, sure, yeah. So you're not going to go all the way to the ocean, you don't think?
Oh, no, we are, yeah. It's just south of the mouth of the Columbia. It's the first place where you can hit actual cliffs into the Pacific.
Oh, fantastic. And what's your plan for getting home?
We're taking the train. We're gonna
that's going to be beautiful.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited about that.
Oh, that'll be great. How many days is that going to take you?
4 days?
Yeah,
4 days.
Like
Nice and relaxing.
Mary, Georgia, Brian, thanks for talking to me, and thanks for being on Bike Talk, and ride safe.
Yeah, good luck with the next 2 big hills in front of you.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you.
So they have a really interesting part of the trip in front of them, and I am always excited to swap information with people going east and west. And he warned me about some big hills that were coming, and they were long climbs after I left them. So thanks a lot, Brian.
Cool. I have a ride this weekend.
Right.
It's going to be on the Western New England Greenway, and it's going to be a short flat ride.
Which means no cars, right?
I am not sure. It's a Greenway, that means no cars?
Well, I don't know if it does or not, but let's hope it does. Yeah.
Yeah. I talked to Tom O'Brien, who reached out because he's been listening to the show. I told him I'm going on the ride, and he had this to say about it.
The Western New England Greenway is a bike-friendly route from Norwalk, Connecticut, all the way to the Canadian border. And Saturday's ride will be from Falls Village, Connecticut to Pittsfield, Massachusetts, about 40 miles with an overnight in Pittsfield, and then the group will return the next day. It's easy and it's relatively flat. The Western New England Greenway was designated as United States Bicycle Route 7 by Adventure Cycling in AASHTO about 10 years ago. It's a primary route to go north and south in the western part of New England. And it was the first bike route in New England to be so designated. And we are attracting more and more bike tourists every year because of that. This is the easiest way to see one of the most beautiful parts of the country.
So this is one of these routes that crisscross the United States that you could find at Adventure Cycling.
They have their routes, which they have maps, and they have sponsored the U.S. bike routes, which are not as completely mapped out, but they are more like trying to create an interstate highway system for bike travel. Our specific route goes from Norwalk, Connecticut to the Canadian border, and we connect up to East Coast Greenway that'll take you to New York City, and the Route Vert in Quebec that'll take you to Montreal. I'm a Warm Showers host, and many people have stayed at my house on the way to Montreal or on the way back, which is very exciting to see.
I'm sure Taylor will appreciate that.
I've been following his adventure. It's a lot of nostalgia for me because my son and I have done a cross-country trip a few years ago.
Fantastic. Which route?
We made our own, but we used some of the Transamerica and we used some of the Western Express from our house in Connecticut to get to Kentucky and pick up the Transamerica. We made up our own route.
All right, Tom. Thanks for taking a break.
Thank you, Nick. I'm so happy that you're interested in this ride. I love your podcast. It just covers every aspect of bike travel that interests me, the touring, the advocacy. I even really like the fact that Taylor slips in a little bit of Tour de France every now and then, which is a favorite of mine too. And I look forward to meeting you and riding with you early on Saturday morning.
See you there.
Oh, that was so great, Nick. And, one of the fun things about doing the show is you're going to have a great time talking with Tom on that ride. I've really enjoyed meeting some of the people who are also listeners of the show on my ride. And it's really fun to meet them in person and, hear their feedback and swap stories. Really great. And, it also sounds a lot, Nick, like the route through New York on the Erie Canal Trail that Patrick Kelly was talking about on his show, Rolling Through, remember?
The Empire State Trail. It also goes from New York City to Canada.
Well, you're going to have a blast on that trip, and it'll be really fun to meet Tom in person.
Yeah. Now we have listener email. This one's from Baltimore Fred again, and it's called Getting Better All the Time. Nick and Taylor, these shows just keep getting better all the time. The variety of topics keeps shaking things up. To-the-point interviews with folks on the ground or on two wheels. I love it. Now I've even discovered that your shows drop late Thursday night. Taylor, your reports engage my interest in ways that other traveling podcasters and YouTubers have not. Maybe it's because you report on the experiences more than the details of the cycling. You mentioned the tough parts together with the positive ones. That helps keep aspiring long-distance cyclists more grounded. However, although you refer to the down parts, the energy in your voice just does not convey any downness. On the day you started, I predicted that your positive and realistic attitude would carry you through. I think I was very right. Baltimore Fred.
Well, that's great, Baltimore Fred. Thank you so much. And I got to tell you, I think I get some of that optimism from my father, which is the point of this trip in the first place. I'm going home to see my dad. And he's an optimist, and that's what keeps him going. You know what I mean?
And so he's reaping what he sowed with your trip to him.
Right. Well, it's really nice, and thank you very much.
We got another email from our friend Karen, who saw that your trip was interrupted because she was following you on Strava, and then she worried because she didn't see anything last Saturday in Minneapolis, and she kept checking Instagram and Strava and finally saw that your trip was interrupted for a good reason, which is that you got a job.
Well, you know, Karen's been on the show in the past, and Karen is the founder of Bikey Girl Bloomers, which is biking clothes, I guess, for women, right? Because I don't wear bloomers. But Karen is also an advocate in Los Angeles and on the Los Angeles Bicycle Advisory Committee.
She was concerned. Here's an email from someone in Norway, Jens. And Jens wrote, I've been listening to the podcast for the past months, going through the episode archives back to back while out riding. A friend of mine turned me on to the show, and it's really stuck with me. In addition to being a sports rider, I'm also a bicycle advocate in Stavanger, Norway. Stavanger? And I use your podcast and a few others to find inspiration on what to do, how to do it, and how to keep motivated to keep pushing that rock up the hill. Great stuff, so please keep it coming. But then he says he wanted to talk about why conservatives don't promote bike riding and bike infrastructure, because it's something that we've talked about. He said it's healthy, it's cheap, it's not big government, etc. We do the same thing here, both on a local level and a national level. I guess everywhere it's the same, and for no apparent reason. He said, what's not so clear is what the opposite of being liberal is in the political context. There's probably ways of deconstructing liberalism and finding the opposing side or sides. So I wonder if you could talk about that. Maybe that's a place where bikelash comes from more than conservatism itself. I'm excited to hear what you think. He also wanted to say that we have talked about cars doing things, cars killing people. And he pointed out that cars don't do that, drivers do. Why do we anthropomorphize cars?
Right. So true. I wish everyone could read the back and forth that you and he did on email, because it was really great. And I think that is an issue for us to dig into in the future, Nick, about why this is continuing to be a left-right conservative liberal issue. I'm thinking of that councilwoman in New York, Vicky Palladino, who is so anti anything that has to do that's not cars, as is Sean Duffy, the Secretary of Transportation, as is, I guess, Donald Trump with America's Bikeway in Washington, D.C. So this is an issue that I think Jens brings up that is worth it for us to dig back into.
You mean now?
No, I don't think now, but in the future, because we should get some other voices. It would be nice to get a conservative voice on the show who either believes in bike lanes or possibly doesn't, and we can shame them.
I did an interview recently with a Swedish researcher, Stefan Gosling, which will be in an upcoming episode, but he was saying in Copenhagen, which is maybe the best city for biking, I mean, that's contested, but like 70% of drivers think that things should be better for cyclists, because they understand that when things are better for cyclists, when there's more people on bikes, there's fewer cars, less traffic. It's better for them. You do better by appealing to what's in it for them, appealing to others' interests.
Before we move on from Jens, I do want to say he mentioned that he heard about the show from other people. And, you and I just heard, Nick, that 75% of people find podcasts by talking to their friends and their colleagues in a certain area of interest. So if you are listening to the show and like what we're talking about, please tell your cycling friends about Bike Talk, because the more people that listen and hear all these viewpoints from all of our guests, the more people, I don't want to say eat the red pill or whatever that pill is, but the more people that see how much we waste on auto infrastructure. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we subsidize driving.
Exactly. So like us on social media, like us and subscribe on Apple Music or Spotify or wherever you listen to stuff, because it really does help other people find the show.
To get back to Jens from Norway for a second, there's one thing that conservatives seem to really hold on to as a value, and it's this idea of freedom. Somebody once said that in Europe, they think about freedom from.
That's interesting, yeah.
And here they think about freedom to.
Right.
Like maybe where in Europe you would have freedom from being
killed
shot
by a car
or shot by somebody with a gun. Here you have freedom to carry around a gun wherever you want in a lot of places, and freedom to drive ridiculous speeds.
Yeah, freedom to drive the biggest car you want as fast as you want, right.
And one group that's fighting against that is Families for Safe Streets. We have an interview now with Sam Trumbull, who's on the steering committee of the DC chapter of Families for Safe Streets. And Sam talks about the implementation on July 1st of the Stop Superspeeders law, where the worst offenders, the repeat speeders, may have to be forced to drive the speed limit.
Oh my God.
That's what I
Crazy. Crazy. It's like mothers for drunk drivers. We have to change the conversation of driving drunk is not cool and speeding is not cool. So here is Sam Trumbull.
Welcome to Bike Talk, Sam.
Thank you. So good to be here.
You have a law going into effect that Families for Safe Streets sponsored.
Yeah, that's right. So Families for Safe Streets is a national organization that has chapters in various locations. And we've been working on a campaign called Stop Superspeeders, which targets specifically the crashes that are caused by speeding or in which speeding is a factor. We know that about a third of all road deaths come from a crash that involves speeding. And with 40,000 people a year that die on our streets, that's a lot of people that could be saved through just reducing people's speeds. It has the potential to be really revolutionary. You know, we're really proud of the work that we've done on this and proud that there are state legislatures that want to take this up and state lawmakers that are ready to champion it. That's a big deal. It's been the law in the District of Columbia for a couple of years now. This was the first year of implementation here at DC. But we passed this in 7 states this year, and the Virginia law went into effect on July 1st.
And what happens through this law?
Mainly, this is going to give sentencing judges the opportunity to assign an alternative form of sentence for folks who are repeat speeding offenders. So instead of taking away someone's driver's license or doing a bunch of like community service or other things that we know aren't super effective at changing people's behavior, a judge can opt to require someone to install intelligent speed assist in their vehicle. And so this is a lot like a breathalyzer interlock system for folks who have been known to drive impaired. Instead, it limits the speed of the vehicle to the legal speed limit for the road that they're on.
Wow, limits the speed of the vehicle to the legal speed limit. And they can do that?
Yeah, I mean, like Google already knows what the speed limit is on every street it's telling you to drive on for the most part. So that information is available. And, you know, municipalities have their own data sharing things that make that accessible to technology companies. And then, you know, obviously the car knows how fast it's going.
I've often wondered why, when you can cap the speed of an e-bike, why you wouldn't just do that in every car.
Yeah, I mean, we've had the ability to do this for quite some time. In fact, New York City rolled out ISA in a bunch of their fleet vehicles several years ago and really drastically reduced crashes with their fleet vehicles. And so, you know, we have the solutions here. People just need to use them. And it's really exciting that, you know, 7 more states will have the ability to use this tool.
But a judge has to decide that somebody's record is so bad that they need to be forced to drive the speed limit.
Yeah, that's correct.
What do you have to do to get this draconian penalty?
So the laws vary a little bit from state to state on like what is the criteria for a super speeder. As far as Families for Safe Streets is concerned, it's generally someone who has had more than 4 police-issued speeding tickets over a 2-year period. In some places, their laws will allow them to use automated ticket systems as the marker. I believe in DC and Virginia and Maryland, it's all police-issued tickets. It just varies a little bit from state to state, but, a study found that drivers who received more than 4 police-issued speeding tickets over a 2-year period were 11 times as likely to be involved in a serious crash compared to the general population. And so it's really an unacceptable level of risk to have those drivers continue on the road, because the question isn't if they're going to injure someone, it's when are they going to injure someone.
I can't imagine serious opposition to this, but I'll bet there was.
Not as much as you might expect. I mean, I think that there are some legitimate concerns that people have about surveillance, particularly like state-sponsored surveillance and the world that we live in right now. I can't fault people for for their skepticism about, state surveillance. And everyone's walking around with a phone in their pocket that is absolutely listening to them and then advertising to them based on what it's listening on. So ISA in your car is maybe not the top priority if that's the thing that you're concerned about.
And so what's next? Will every state have the Stop Superspeeders law?
We certainly hope so. I mean, it's such an effective tool. In so few circumstances are we able to issue, a sentence for a crime that is so specifically targeted to preventing that same behavior and not limiting someone's movement through the world in another way, which is, part of what we find as a regular opposition to, increased fines and increased penalties for poor driving is the idea that taking someone's license away is going to take away their economic mobility, their physical mobility, their access to healthcare, because we just lack the public transit that would be necessary to replace those car trips with transit trips. And this really gets around that, right? Like they can continue to drive their car. They just have to do it at a speed that is legal. And so this legislation has been introduced in 11 more states. So we're hoping for at least some of those states to pass it this year. It's been pretty successful. Where we've had it introduced, it has passed. And as you can imagine, the opposition doesn't have a whole lot of strong arguments, as you said, for opposing this.
This is a good law, and it's just one of the things you're doing at Families for Safe Streets. We talked to somebody who told us about your framework for autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, so Families for Safe Streets just released a white paper about autonomous vehicles, and it created a framework that we're calling Gain and Guard. So it's premised on the idea that the promise of autonomous vehicles is one that we have to hold them to. So autonomous vehicles should be at least 10 times safer than human-driven vehicles, and any particular use case for your vehicle should not be more dangerous than a human driver. And eventually, we hope that if autonomous vehicles are on our streets, that they are 100 times safer. That would pretty much reduce road fatalities in this country to nothing. And that would be a really big deal, enormous deal. Everyone has known someone who's affected by traffic violence, whether that's, the kid in your high school who flipped their car over because they were driving too fast, or your neighbor whose foot was run over in a crosswalk. Every one of us can tell a story about traffic violence in our lives, and some of us more than others. And to eliminate that as a thing that regularly occurs in this country is possible. And it's so exciting to see that there's a future that might include that.
And as you alluded to, some people are scared of or have some thoughts about AVs.
I mean, there's the members of Families for Safe Streets span the entire spectrum of extremely skeptical of AVs to give me autonomous vehicles yesterday. And so we, as an organization, want to make sure that when autonomous vehicles are on our roads, that we don't lower the bar from their promise to just being as good as human drivers. Like, we have already accepted an unacceptable level of road death and injury from human drivers. And we have technology that can make it better, and we have to insist that that be the case. Technology companies aren't really known for doing the right thing just to do the right thing. And so legislation and regulation should hold them to the promises that they're making. I wasn't involved in the white paper, but the team that worked on that and the people who led that really put an enormous amount of work into it. And I think it has the potential to really give us a strong national regulatory framework for autonomous vehicles that looks a lot more like aviation, where we stop, trusting auto manufacturers to self-assess their safety and evaluate their own crash data, and has independent regulation that evaluates those elements. Many people are scared of flying, but we know that flying is so much safer than driving a car. And part of that is that there is independent regulatory oversight of the aviation industry.
You've got the framework, you've got the Stop Superspeeders laws in 18 states. There was something else recently involving insurance?
Over the last couple of years, we've had two really big successes, one in Virginia and one in D.C. And the D.C. law just passed and is laying over in Congress now. So D.C. is not a state, so Congress gets 30 days to decide whether we get to keep our laws. But we raised the minimum car insurance requirements in both states. So in DC, I can speak to the process for this. We've been working on this for 10 years, like actively working on it for 10 years. DC's mandatory insurance minimums were set in 1986. And so they're 40 years old, the minimum being $25,000 per person in a crash and $50,000 per incident. What we've been able to increase it to is only double that. $25,000 in medical expenses in 1986 costs almost $200,000 now. So $50,000 is still woefully inadequate for crash victims, but it's going to make a huge difference in the types of crashes that involve soft tissue injuries, the kinds of things that can make your life really miserable but aren't going to be permanent. It'll make it easier for people who are victims of that kind of traffic violence to get the money that they need to seek medical treatment. And that's huge, because so it's not just the life-altering injuries that are important here, particularly in a country that doesn't have great access to healthcare and in which healthcare is so expensive.
So you've got Stop Superspeeders, you've raised the insurance, and you've got the AV framework. Anything else?
Well, there's a lot more we'd like to do. And I want to encourage folks who care about these issues to contact your local Families for Safe Streets chapter and talk about what advocacy issues you'd like to be a part of, because we really take our direction from the members. And healing is not the right word for what it means to make this kind of change. For people who have lost a part of themselves or who have lost someone else, there is no bringing that back, but the justice that we can find in the world is ensuring that it doesn't happen to anyone else.
You're a member because you're a survivor, right?
That's right. Yeah, I was hit by a speeding and presumably drunk driver in September of 2012. So it's been 14 years since my crash. And I have, life-altering injuries that still require care and have permanently changed the way that I move. And doing this work has given me a direction to channel the feelings that I have about that, the grief and the pain and the anger. I can direct that into something that's productive. It helps.
And you're there for anyone else.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, peer support is a big part of what Families for Safe Streets does. We have folks who are trained to offer peer support. We do mentorship. There's, online support groups that meet for folks who are too far away from a chapter. There's a lot of ways to get involved. It doesn't have to be advocacy, but we're here for you. This isn't something that anyone should go through alone. And given that 40,000 people die on our roads every year and 100,000 plus are injured, there's a lot of folks out there who might not even have realized that traffic violence is a thing and that there are people that they can talk to about it.
Families for Safe Streets has been on Bike Talk a bunch of times. We'll keep reaching out and hope to hear from you.
Great. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
She made so many good points, Nick. We are going to continue this conversation in future weeks, no?
Oh, yeah. We're going to talk about AVs next week, and that's kind of on a similar note. You know, people are skeptical or suspicious of
but AVs
technology.
Don't speed, right?
Yeah, they're not supposed to.
I don't think they do. I mean, I've only been in one once, and it didn't speed. But, one time is...
Anecdotal?
Yes.
I think a lot of the objections to AVs has to do with who's regulating them. Do we trust the big companies to regulate themselves?
Right.
And also, they don't do anything about car dependency.
We're going to have Peter Norton on next week to talk about just that. So that'll be a really interesting conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah. How about Stacy's news?
Here we go.
I'm Stacy with this week's news. Last week, Nebraska native Mike Forsberg, a renowned conservation photographer, and Andy Caven from the International Crane Foundation completed a bike trip along the Central Flyway migration route used by endangered whooping cranes. It took them 2 months to bike the 2,500 miles from Texas's Gulf Coast to central Saskatchewan in Canada. Their motive is to inspire conservation efforts for the rarest and largest of the world's cranes. From the New Bedford Guide, as America celebrates 250 years of independence, Cape Verdeans in New Bedford, Mass. celebrated 51 years of independence and 47 years of a community bike ride. This yearly event is fueled by pride in a heritage and a country that many are just learning about due to the FIFA World Cup's newest team, Cabo Verde Tubarões Azuis. Each year, the preparation begins with bike donations so that any child who wants to ride a bike has a bike that remains theirs to own after the ride. From the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, the Edmonton City Council is looking into alternative ways to incorporate bike lanes and shared pathways along 1 mile of 50th Street that links 3 neighborhoods and is the critical path for 5 schools and 3 small colleges. But some residents are complaining. The chief complaint? Loss of parking. From the New Republic, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy announced this week that his department would redirect nearly $2 billion in Biden-era grants away from establishing DEI bike lanes to build roads and bridges instead. In reality, those grants directed funds to build a new transit center in North Carolina, replace bridges in New Mexico, extend streets in New Hampshire, install traffic lights and crosswalks in Missouri, and, yes, bike lanes in Seattle. Now the financial status of these projects is unclear. The Trump administration has made extensive efforts to root out federal programs addressing racial discrimination. To even have considered racial inequality is grounds for losing millions of dollars. Americans will suffer, especially with gas prices remaining high and likely to stay that way.
Thanks, Stacy. So while I was in Minneapolis, I got the chance to sit down and talk with Brett McGraw again and Laura Mitchell, who we've had on the show in the past, and Luke Van Santen. And they, of course, think Minneapolis is the cycling capital of America, even though Sparta thinks it is. But we got into this conversation of, are there too many cooks in the kitchen? By having so many small organizations that fight for safe streets, are we diluting our power by not coalescing behind the 2 or 3 major organizations that are fighting for safe streets? So here is Laura, Brett, and Luke.
Great.
So once again, I'm back in Minneapolis with my escort service. That gets me coming and going, I might add. But we are now at a brewery called Unmapped, which is a great way to end a bike ride. And we rode on all trails getting here, which is really wonderful. But I'm with Laura Mitchell, who is the former board chair of Our Streets Minneapolis and has been on the show a couple of times, and Luke Van Santen, who is a co-founder with Brett McGraw, who's been on the show, of the West Metro Active Transportation Alliance. And what I wanted to ask you guys really quick was, do we think having more organizations like the West Metro Active Transportation Alliance or the East Metro or the South Metro, or is it better to coalesce behind 1 or 2 main organizations as opposed to having a plethora of small organizations? And Luke, you answered
yes to both. And that's actually one of the reasons that we came up with WMATA, the West Metro Active Transportation Alliance, because there were individuals in neighboring suburbs here for the longest time, all trying to work within their jurisdictional boundaries and just feeling like they're spinning their wheels because you're so small, you don't have that critical mass to get things going. And finally, Sylvie, our other co-founder, kind of was the impetus. She said, hey, you guys, we need to get together. We were all on board instantly with that.
Right. Get together with your own small organization
with being that slightly larger,
being part of a bigger,
but still local, focused on the West Metro. And the second yes is we absolutely have to have advocacy groups. Like
people for bikes or the league.
Local one, Bike and Men. Yes.
Okay. And our streets, which Sylvia is on the board at, too. So there's so much crossover.
And Move Minnesota and now defunct Move Minneapolis. All of these different entities that are really have that kind of higher level reach into the legislatures and
and the power and the money to do that.
Right.
Laura, you said that people were on your staff that was a paid staff, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah, our streets is really lucky to be able to have a number of paid staff people who then can do the things that those of us who are working in advocacy, which myself included, outside of our day jobs don't have the time and capacity and maybe some specific skill set to work on. I think the more that we can partner and coalesce and have these coalitions of hyper-local orgs, like we even have a neighborhood-based one that a friend of mine is working on starting, like super specific in South Minneapolis to focus on some infrastructure projects there, because the more that we can get directly impacted neighbors together to do that advocacy work, the more that we hopefully can impact those hyper-local projects. But then the bigger the project, the more folks it impacts. I think the better off we are coalescing around those things and having the combination of all those orgs.
And with networks like the Twin Cities Metro is rapidly getting better at, it does have an impact for people in South Minneapolis or Bloomington or Minnetonka when there's some project going on in St. Louis Park, central to all of them, that they might be going through.
Yeah, it's a connector.
Right. You know, to get that network that much stronger.
Right, okay. Well, I've got some stickers now, and I'll give you some Bike Talk stickers. the highly coveted Bike Talk stickers. Anything else to add about this idea of, do we have too many cooks in the kitchen, or...
Well, I think it's important to have organizations that can work at that hyper-local level, which is what we're trying to do, where we're working with the planning departments and city councils in our cities. And in a suburban context, there's very few issues that we have that don't cross boundaries. So having people in Minnetonka and Hopkins and St. Louis Park that can all work together and try to get our cities to work together. At the state level, then, we do have Bike MN, which we're a chapter of the Bicycle Alliance in Minnesota, and they're working on those big statewide issues like e-bike, e-moto laws, and trying to shore up our Idaho stop law and get us the stop at red light and move on part of it. So it's important to have them, but they don't have the capacity to work on a trail in Minnetonka.
Right. And seldom when you ride a bike do you stay within one jurisdiction. You know, you're constantly going into different areas.
When I commute, I go from Minnetonka through St. Louis Park into Minneapolis, and then the different route home, St. Louis Park, Hopkins, Minnetonka. So it's not just one city or one trail that I'm staying on.
Yeah, it's a whole backbone of trails.
I also think bike advocacy is not in a vacuum, and so we are lucky to have a number of different organizations locally that take different lenses on these issues. So like Bike MN is really great at focusing on biking, walking, and a statewide look at things. Move Minnesota is more focused on public transportation. Our Streets is more focused on like the intersection and the way that marginalization of certain communities is impacted, housing, density, those sorts of things, and taking those different lenses. I mean, sometimes our organizations actually disagree with each other on certain stances, but I think it's helpful to have those different perspectives and to have multiple eyes on things and different ways of looking at it because it's all interconnected.
Do the big organizations ever get together and conference?
Yeah, they don't have like a formal conference altogether, but they certainly do overlap in certain bodies of work. Bike MN and our Streets in particular do partner a lot on their work around the Capitol. The work around fighting the I-94 has been intersectional, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity for folks to work together. But there are spaces where they work together, and there's spaces where they disagree and actually don't work together.
And sometimes that's okay, I think. The best idea wins.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's the answer to my question. Yes. I didn't get you.
No, I just take advantage of all the work they do.
Beautiful answer.
It's beautiful because literally, like you just said, does it connect? And it's like, yeah, when Brett and I through the years were like, oh my God, this trail just opened up and it connects. And that's the biggest thing. We can go wherever.
Well, again, we rode 10, 12 miles to get here, never on a road, all on trails. So good job, Minneapolis.
Yeah, and suburbs.
So I really enjoyed my time in Minneapolis, and all of the riding I did through Minneapolis was on bike paths, which is really great.
Yeah.
But I'm getting ready to end my trip, Nick. I've got one more week, and then I'll be done with my trip, going from my daughters in San Francisco to my dad in Lansing, Michigan. And I don't know if you remember, but I spoke with Jake Hess when I was just starting my trip, and he was about halfway through his trip. He rode from the Canadian border down to the Mexican border. And I wanted to reach out and talk to him a little bit about how does life change when you go back to regular life? And he had some pretty prescient thoughts. So here is Jake Hess.
Great.
As my trip winds down, I'm already feeling the, what's the word, trepidation or anxiety a little bit about how I re-enter into normal life. I wanted to talk again with Jake Hess. And if you've been listening to the show, you remember I met Jake, God, maybe a month ago, right, Jake? A month ago in the redwood forests of California. And you were in the middle of a 50-day camping-only trip from the Canadian border to the Mexican border through Washington State, Oregon, and then, of course, California. Jake, thanks for giving me your time and coming back on the show.
Of course. I'm really stoked to be back. I love talking about this stuff.
Well, tell me about your ride so the audience remembers a little bit about what it is. And then I want you to go into, you know, how it is, because the first thing you said when we got on the line was, oh my God, we're both inside.
Yeah.
So I want to hear about not only the trip and about what you did and how you did it, but how you reintegrated into being in a cubicle.
Yeah. So I started my trip in Vancouver. I went north for a little bit and did, I think it's called the Sunshine Coast. Really great little tour, about 300 miles that loops around the Strait of Georgia, came back down to Washington, and then hugged the coast all the way down to the border of Mexico below San Diego.
Wow.
I did camp the whole way. I did my best to, you know, like cook all my food and kind of treat it like a through hike, but also a big joy of the trip was just stopping in little towns and just sort of seeing what was going on there and getting good meals and things like that. So everything about my trip was focused around where I wanted to camp and what outdoor thing I wanted to see, all the park systems and everything like that. So it was a pretty big transition to go back to all of a sudden being in a major city like Los Angeles.
Right. How was it? Do you miss getting up every morning and starting at A and ending at B and putting in, how many miles were you doing a day?
By the end, I would say second half of the trip, it was about 50, 60 miles a day. I know there's a lot of touring cyclists who probably do quite a bit more than that, but part of the joy for me of the trip was having just a little bit of wiggle room every day to talk to someone, to go see one or two things and leave it open. If you know, you talk to a local person, they say like, hey, this is a really good thing you should go check out. You can take your time and do whatever you want.
Yeah, can you name a couple of those good things that you checked out? Because I rode about a third of that way. You know, I rode from San Francisco to Florence, Oregon, and of course met you in the Redwoods. But you did the whole coast. What were some of the things that jumped out as, oh, I'm so glad I saw that, you know?
Oh, man. When I was in Washington, I went to these hot springs. That was quite a cool side mission.
Always good, yeah.
Because it was kind of backcountry camping at that point. It was a fun adventure where I thought I could camp somewhere, and they said no, that there was a dam that flooded the road 10 years ago, and that's not there anymore. So, you know, I got the bear can, I went in and I hiked my bike up and stuff like that. Right after I saw you, just even doing little, you know, let's say dumb stuff where it was like, I'm tired, it's late, I got to go to camp. But there's like a thing on my map that says there's an albino redwood tree down this road that's like a steep hill, and you're like, I guess I'll go down the steep hill and walk around this area until I find a tree that looks cool, you know. Right after we bumped into each other, I think it's called Pismo Dunes.
Sure,
was great,
Pismo
you know.
is how
Pismo,
I would call it.
Loved doing that, like was trying to figure out where it breaks away from the cars and talking to just rangers and getting information, and then, you know, running around. I'm a little all over the place with how I'm portraying this, but that's a perfect example. It's like I rolled up to camp at 7 o'clock at night, and it's like No, I'm going to go walk in the dark. I'm going to go as far as I can in the dunes and just have a beer and run around under the stars. And
no, I totally agree. You know, it's funny. I did a lot of my riding in the evening. I sort of hung out in my campground more in the morning and, you know, made my coffee and oatmeal and, you know, took my time and let my tent dry from the dew or the rain before I packed it up and, you know, wrote in my journal and all of that. And I did less of that at night.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you kind of rolled in at 7 and still had a couple of hours of daylight of sort of exploring the area.
I would try to do that.
How important was that beer at the end of the ride? Because I got to tell you.
Oh my God. I know. That's actually, it's kind of funny. That's kind of one of the first things we bonded over. It's like that perfect tall boy size that everyone seems to carry is just a great way to end the day.
No, it has a little bit of food substance, it feels like, and it has a little bit of alcohol, it feels like, and it's a great way to end the ride.
Yeah, no doubt.
So when you got to Mexico, did you then train back to L.A. or did you ride back to L.A.?
It's funny to think about ending your tour. It feels arbitrary, right? Like there's more road there. It's like, why am I stopping? So I was quite excited about the idea of trying to do one last side mission and go into Mexico. And I actually, in Los Angeles, this band that I play in splits a studio with another band. And I met one of the guys from that band just one time, and he mentioned that he lives in Tecate and has a little bar there. So when I got close, I reached out to him. So instead of taking the train back, that was sort of the dreamy vision I had from the beginning. I rented a car, drove an hour east to the Tecate border crossing, parked my car at the state side, walked across, had lunch, got to see the town. We hung out. We had like a great time. It was a perfect example of like another, like, I'm going to talk to a stranger. Like we're going to hang out. We're going to do something new. Walked back across, got in the car and drove back to LA. Which,
great.
Side note, was crazy. Like getting in a car again after 50 days. You know how when you get on the highway and you're like, you just feel it. You don't really look at the speedometer. You're like, I know what 35 feels like. I know what, whatever. I get on the highway. I'm like, this is it. And I look down. I'm going like 45 miles an hour. This sucks, dude. I hate this.
Yeah. I'm not finished yet. I've got about 2 more weeks. What was the biggest transition going from the bike ride to being at home? I mean, I can see you now. You're in your studio at home, and
honestly, it's challenging. I feel like I'm still feeling the transition. I've been back 2 or 3 weeks. The very last night of my trip, I stayed in a hotel because I was in San Diego, and I remember sitting on the bed and being like, "This feels bad." There wasn't really a victory lap component for me. I was like, I really miss being in my tent. This is scary to go back, and I'm quite fortunate to have rolled right into a job. I work in the film and TV industry in post-production, so it's a very computer-centric job. I love it, and I feel lucky for it, but going right back into sort of being at a computer tied to a desk was really hard. So I'm at this position where, like, I came back honestly really inspired because something about this trip, of course, I know I'm talking a lot. I really want to hear, what you have to say about your trip, but it made me feel so strong, so confident in ways that I don't necessarily always feel in my, let's say, civilian life. So I was trying to be optimistic and think a lot about how can I take these things that I've learned or just attitudes and ways of behaving and bring it back. And so I was really gung-ho and feeling excited to like tackle that. And now I'm at this position where I'm like, I'm half doing that and I'm half what feels like failing, It's really shocking how quickly some of those just feelings flood right back in. Yeah. Well,
I think what you hit on is what I'm feeling also. And I'm quite a bit older than you, I think. But that feeling of self-reliance and self-confidence is very empowering. I remember I was riding in the middle of North Dakota and there was very little around. And whenever there was a little town on a map, it was hit or miss if there was really a town there or not, or if that town offered anything, because a lot of the information from adventure cycling was maybe not quite correct, or the market that is in that town was closed because it was 7 o'clock. But I remember leaving one little town at like 7:30 in the evening, and there were storm clouds above, and it was sort of sprinkling a little bit. And here I am riding off with maybe 20 miles to the next little town, and I have no idea what's in that little town. and it's starting to rain, and it's 7:30 at night, and I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing? I'm going off into the middle of nowhere, and I don't know where I'm gonna land. And I don't know if I can make the 20 miles to the next little town, or if that little town even offers anything. And that was a little scary. But then when I solved it and I found a place to camp and I got set up and I had my beer and my ramen noodles and my tent, then I felt like, okay, you can put me down in a unusual situation and I can find a safe way of navigating myself through that. So I agree. It's very sort of empowering. What are some of the other things besides that you can think of that you learned on the trip?
This is going to sound silly, but I've tried to write down these buckets, like just to be really, really as simple as possible. A big thing was organization. I'm a cluttery dude. On my trip, I knew where everything, I could find it in the dark. If you asked me to get something, I knew where everything was. And there's something really nice about that. Yeah. Confidence was something I wrote down. We just talked about that. I mean, you feel invincible. It's really, really quite cool. Social aspect is really nice. Like by the end of the trip, it just was part of the day, was talking to someone new. And I'm like, I live in a huge city. I don't do that here. I could go walk down the street. There's a million people right there and have a conversation with someone I've never met. Another big one is momentum. Things sort of like build on the road. It's like if you just go from point A to point B, you've had a meaningful day, even if you have done nothing else. And so everything compounds beyond that. If I went from point A to point B and I had a really nice conversation with someone, it's like, today was a great day. If I went from point A to point B, I had a nice conversation and I had an amazing meal, it's like, this is unbelievable. Point A, point B, and it's like, how can you look at your day in a life where you don't go from point A to point B? It's the same point. I'm starting in my apartment and I'm going to end in my apartment. And so when not a ton happens in that day, it's like, how can you find meaning in that? And I really mean that, like not trick yourself into like a mental game to just be like, oh, it was meaningful, but like, how do you see the meaning in the things that you do? Yeah.
Well, I would almost answer to that. Going from point A to point B doesn't have to be physical on a map, from this town to this town. Going from point A to point B could be more of a mental exercise or more of an emotional exercise throughout the day. But I totally agree with you. That is really what I am missing and going to miss when I'm off the road is, and I started my journal every morning with, I woke up in, meaning, this That's town, and then the next town, I woke up in the next town, meaning that you're just always on the move. So I really love that list of, you used the word bucket, but I certainly wouldn't call that a bucket list. But.
Oh, I meant more like these buckets of like categories.
Categories, okay.
These sort of broad categories of things.
My next question is, are you going to do it again? And if so, what would you do and how would you might do it different?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I don't know. The way I look at these trips, because I've done one other sort of backpacking trip, and it's like when you have the thought, you can't get it out of your head. And that's how I knew I was going to do this trip. It's like I had the thought, and it just did not go away. So it's like it's something I have to do. So I'm kind of waiting for that next thing to pop in.
Good.
I think it will be a bike trip. I quite liked doing it on the bike. I mean, it was like nothing else. Of course, there's a dream of sort of doing South America, North America, Alaska. I just think that that would be amazing. It would just be incredible. The most difficult part is taking the time off. And would I do anything differently? I gotta be honest, I was pretty stoked with how self-sustaining my system was, and it would be very interesting to do it where the conditions changed and you would have to make changes to your bike, changes to your bags, changes to the clothing that you needed.
Right.
So I think something that incorporated that would be quite cool.
Yeah. I have had to do that a little bit. It was cold when I started, and it's been warming up steadily as I go.
Wow.
And so I'm thinking about, can I send something back? Can I drop something? Do I need to add, more shorts now or more sunscreen or something like that?
Totally.
But I love the idea of, rather than forcing another trip, just kind of letting it come to you. And I guarantee it will. Because I think it's going to happen to me too. I'm going to find another route that I want to do or another time that I can schedule to do it.
Yeah. This way of life is really wonderful, and it just is so appealing. And if I can do one more little anecdote that's not meant to be dramatic, it was just sort of an observation I had, but I think it was like the second day I was back. Like, it was so quick. It's late. I'm walking around my apartment. I've already kind of have stuff everywhere. I'm like, I worked late. My back hurts from sitting in a chair. You know, I didn't do something, like I didn't do my morning exercises that I always did on my trip, and I'm feeling down. And I muttered under my breath, God, I hate myself, or whatever. Not trying to be dramatic, but like, you know, that line of thinking is not new to me. That's something, you know, throughout your whole life you think that. But what was so striking about it was, as soon as I said it, something that normally would just be like whatever, I was like, whoa, I don't think I have really said that to myself or really thought that in the last 2 months that I've been on this trip. And so I really had this moment of like, wow, it made me think about ways that I think about myself and in my head, and how much of that is intrinsic to me and the decisions I've made, and how much of that is sort of circumstantial about just kind of living in this world and grinding and being in a city, or, you know, all this stuff. And
no, that's really wonderful. And I have a similar feeling. And maybe it's because we're both in the entertainment industry. I have these feelings like, you know, I'm such a loser. I can't book a job. I can't do this. I can't do that. And I did not have those feelings, and I have not had those feelings so far on the trip. So, boy, that's a big takeaway. If you and I can take away that from our trips, I think we have been very successful.
Yeah. It gets you thinking about what does an alternative way of living really look like? And I'm going to steal something, because I was talking about this with one of my close friends, and he said, you know, what is a better kind of form of revolt than riding a bicycle on roads that were built for cars, you know?
Beautiful. That's a beautiful way to end it. Jake, I knew you would have some great things to say and some good advice about the re-entering, quote unquote, normal life. I'm so glad you did the trip. I'm so glad you made it safe. I'm so glad that we had a chance to meet and talk and kind of hit it off. And thanks for coming back on Bike Talk.
Of course. Honored to be here. And yeah, I'm so stoked for you for the rest of your trip. And I have a lot more questions, so...
We will talk again, I'm sure.
Cool.
I'm going to be right where Jake is in about a week from now. So I'll let you know how I feel about reintegrating back into, you know, normal life, because I really am enjoying being on the road, Nick.
You must miss some things.
Well, I do. I miss my wife, and I miss my dog, and I miss, you know, my bed. But there's something about getting up at point A, and your goal for the day is getting to point B. And the people that you meet along the way and the obstacles that you overcome along the way keeps you really present. And I'm going to miss that. And hopefully I can take that with me when I go back to, quote unquote, normal life.
Yeah. Good show.
Yeah, and I have to say thank you, because I know that we had to push our recording tonight because I was late getting into town. So I want to thank you and our guests. We want to thank Sam Trumbull from Families for Safe Streets and Tom O'Brien, Jake Hess, Brett McGraw, Laura Mitchell, and Luke Van Santen. And we want to thank our regulars, Stacy Randecker, Amy Ziering, Josh Hagland, Julie Richard, Lindsay Sturman, and Kevin Burton.
And thank you, Taylor.
Thank you, Nick.
Ride safe.
That's my line.
I keep getting you.
This episode of Bike Talk is sponsored by the law offices of Pocras and De Los Reyes, with offices in Los Angeles and Bakersfield, and serving all of Southern California.
Bike Talk is a project of CRSP and the Los Angeles Eco-Village Institute. And that was Bike Talk. If you have a story, a tip, or a topic, head over to biketalk.org and send us a message. Talk again next week.
Got yourself a bike. Oh, got yourself a bike. Oh, got yourself a bike.